They're founders that are visionary, that are painting a world that does not exist. Think of like Steve Jobs when he says there should be a phone with no buttons on it. Right? What? Or even Elon Musk, right? There's going to be electric cars. And I was like, who's going to buy a $120,000 electric car? Like, seriously? But here we are. The second type of founders are more what I consider to be execution-led founders. So today, if a founder starts an autonomous car company, they're not painting anything new. But still, Waymo can also only work in certain geographies, despite the billions of dollars went into it and the 15, 18 years of work that went into it. So it is about execution. It's about engineering. It's about making things work. Alex Karp comes to mind at Palantir. Most people still don't know what Palantir actually does, but he's been executing.
Most robotics demos never ship. Deployed is about the ones that do. This is Deployed, where physical AI gets real.
Welcome, Bilal. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, look, I wanted to start just a little bit hearing more about your journey. I mean, obviously, our paths have crossed over the years and more in the last couple of years. But your journey is an amazing one, kind of crossing through MIT as well. And so, would love for you to kind of start a little bit. I mean, go ahead and start from the beginning. Like, tell us where you've come from.
Come from very humble beginnings. It's sometimes amazing to me, myself, like, wow, I lived this life in Silicon Valley and, drive a Tesla with FSD and grew up with barely able to afford a bicycle. But anyways, my father's from India, my mom's from Pakistan. They met in Pakistan, married, decided to stay there. I grew up there, grew up in what we would consider to be a lower middle class family, had no business being here. But, America has this amazing system that we go and find the smartest people around the world and bring them here. I hope we continue to do that till eternity. It's the greatest asset that we gather and build. Because of that, I got full scholarship effectively to come to the US, did my undergrad. And, like a good South Asian kid, I was like, chemistry, physics, mathematics. Those are the only fields you study, right? And that's what I did. And then I ended up at MIT, did my PhD there. I did physical chemistry. I thought I would become a faculty member and realized that the passion that was burning inside me was to build product. Eventually I realized what a product was. It was a manifestation of technology into something people can use. And a product is a product if it has customers, right? And customers are customers if they give you revenue. And revenue is real revenue if there's margin associated with it. Understanding that was like, aha, that's what a business is.
Right.
So I became an entrepreneur out of MIT and started a company, built that company. It was automotive applications, biomedical device applications. Corning took over the automotive side. We spun out the biomedical side. And then a bunch of VCs came calling, asking me to join them. And our common friend, Hemant Taneja, had just become partner at a firm called General Catalyst. It was a much smaller firm than it is now. It was only in Boston, but Hemant asked me to join him. And I joined him to help build the deep tech practice, became a VC. Frankly, didn't know what VC was, learned on the job. Back then, it was still a apprenticeship model. I got to work with Hemant and many others, amazing VCs. And then eventually decided that the action was happening on the West Coast. Like the mid-2000s, it was very clear, we had Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all of that stuff was happening here, Box and Dropbox. And so decided to move out to the West Coast, initially thinking I'd stay with GC. And then a fund called Lux Capital reached out, which was, still, I think, $100, $200 million fund. And they asked me to join them as a partner to help them build the firm. I did that. And spent the next 12 years there, invested in 65, 70 companies, deployed close to $700 million, built the AUM to over $5.5 billion with the help of, obviously, the entire team there. And became, learned what VC is and then decided to act on it and build it and shape it. And as of last year, left to start a new firm called Red Glass Ventures, partially taken over the red glasses that I sometimes get stopped at airports and restaurants. People recognize me with that, but really the primary motive to start a new firm is to focus on a very huge transformation that's happening in our society, which is software and especially AI that's transforming the real world, the physical world that has largely remained dumb to some extent, or if it was automated, it was automated in very rigid ways, and you know all about it. But I think AI is going to transform that, from workflows to autonomy in our systems to obviously interaction between literally the engineer working on the product and the consumer using it. That distance is closing, and the business models are changing. So wanted to focus on that, and then also focus on early stage. At my heart, I'm still a product guy. I still love founders. I like to build authentic relationships. I don't see myself as a capital allocator. I see myself as in the service of founders on behalf of LPs who have money, and having the privileged position where, as a VC once said a few years ago, that resonates in my head every day almost, which is, this is the greatest show on earth, and I have the front row seat to it. So I'm enjoying that.
I want to go deeper in a number of those transitions, but I think I want to go first to kind of deep tech, right? Obviously, getting a PhD is like a personal investment in going super, super deep. But I mean, the thesis for a long time has been that hardware and deep tech is kind of uninvestable, right? Was there truth to that, or was that always just like a kind of meme that people put out there? Because you've been investing in deep tech for a long time.
There is truth to that, but it has changed a lot. Investors, and especially early stage investors, had to learn some important lessons along the way, myself included. But here's the first most important thing. Like I feel like every 5 to 10 years, some major transformation happens in the hardware world that completely changes the world. We can go back to horse ride buggy days and trains and automobiles and computers that were as large as a room. We had to walk into it, and computers that sit on our laps, and computers that are now in our ears and in our heads, right? And at my previous firm, we used to call it the half-life of technology transformation, which is like shrinking, ever shrinking, and ever so powerful. And if that hadn't happened, we would still be wearing hats and riding buggies and high-fiving each other. But so that is amazing. That has happened. And in some ways, US has been at the forefront of driving that. And we've been able to do that because we've been able to take risks. Like the idea of risk, and then eventually in my world, risk capital, is a very powerful one. There's smart people all around the world. I always talk about there's like 200 million plus people like me in the country that I come from, Pakistan, right? But so it's not that I'm any smarter than anybody else. Yes, I got opportunities and I worked hard. But the most important thing was that I was given an environment in which I could thrive. And I think technology thrives in the right environments. The first generation in my lifetime of investing for the last 18 years, people realized that, hey, we should invest in these very large markets. Like, all of enterprise software market globally is about $4 trillion, right? Just automotive alone is bigger than that, right? So people misunderstand the size of these markets, right? The construction industry is massive, manufacturing, industrials, huge industries, trillions and trillions of dollars. So I think people started to invest in that, but they didn't know what kind of founders to pick. So the first set of founders that we picked in venture capital to do this were, going back 20 years, were like people that had spent 20, 30 years at like a Shell corporation or a GE, and executives with like monograms on their sleeves, right? They know how to work. And we realized that the markets were right, but they weren't entrepreneurial. They didn't have the risk-taking appappetite. They were doing things the way it was done naturally, but that's not how change happens. The second generation of startups that got funded, we were like, we need to change those founders. So we found founders that are entrepreneurial, that are risk-taking. And we attracted people that were willing to go into spaces that are much deeper stack, a lot more technological, depth, and risk associated with that, a lot of capital needs. And that did quite well, but it still wasn't enough. That resulted in the Teslas of the world or the SpaceXs of the world, right? And amazing. These are fascinating companies. It took 20 years to get that. What is happening now that's really powerful is that people are starting to realize that, hey, if this sort of deep tech world was seen as low gross margins, slower sales cycles, and higher capital complexity and capital needs, that is changing, right? Things are becoming more distributed. AI tools are allowing not only for you to drive your robot autonomously, but a lot of work that you do at the back end, right? I'm sure your developers are using some sort of a, co-pilot for coding. Your designers are using software that is accelerating so things are becoming compressed. Timelines are becoming compressed. Capital requirements are becoming less. Margins are improving thus because of that. So a lot of those constraints are going away. So this is becoming more interesting for more entrepreneurs and more executives to want to join, who otherwise would have gone to other industries.
Yep.
And I think people are starting to feel that if I'm going to do something that is risk-taking, might as well do something that matters. And that's these industries.
I feel pretty strongly that like one of the best things possible that could have happened to robotics in the last couple of years is that Jensen put that graph of AI
Physical
and
AI
put
at
physical AI at top, right? Because it sucked a bunch of really amazing talent to work on that problem, right? Who had, for a while we've been trying to pull those folks out of self-driving and other places into robotics, and self-driving was such a attraction force too, because it was again this like incredibly difficult problem, and I think some of the deepest thinkers, smartest minds want to work on the hardest problems, and so when Jensen pinned that as the hardest problem, it's huge benefit to the industry that we've had a lot of progress in the last, not even 18 months since he put that out, of great papers, great research, great fundamental progress, lots of capital flowing into that. But I'm curious how you think about risk in deep tech, because there's fundamentally technology risk. Like, does the science work, right? Quantum computing, things like that. Like, how can we increase the number of qubits? Like, does that? And then there's commercial risk, like, is the market ready, right? And then there's engineering and technical risk of, can it be built, how effectively, how cost effective, and then I think there's like, I think of it as like unit economic risk, right? Which is, can data centers in space push off enough heat in a cost-effective way?
Does the math work for more than one company?
Does the math work, right? And I would say, like, my experience at Amazon driving robotics was all about like that, eliminating that risk, make sure the math works, and then go all in, right? And then, so this is our strategy at Amazon, was like, make sure the math works, eliminate the science risk, right? And just turn it into an engineering problem and go fast. And that's how we went 50,000 robots to 500,000 robots in 4 years, right? But in deep tech, like, all of these risks exist simultaneously, right? And then you have just, there's founder market fit risk, there's founder science fit, but there's also just founder entrepreneurial. Like, one of the things I was impressed by when at a Lux founder retreat was how deeply commercial all those they were all deeply technical, but like really focused on how do we eliminate the commercial risk here. And I don't know if that was just the cohort I happened to be hanging out with, or if that was
a Bilal's posse in a corner.
Okay.
No,
was that
I think
a bit
they're all
your
like
philosophy? Like, was that a strategy? Like, find very smart people who are willing to be commercial? Like, how do you, what risk were you willing to take, and what risks do you not like taking as much?
So, number one, there's risks all over the place. There's intrinsic risks and extrinsic risks. A lot of things could go wrong in any company, in any startup. That said, from a venture perspective, if you think about risk all the time, one of the problems you run into is that if you lose your money, you lose 1x your money. But if you don't take the risk and that thing becomes successful, you could have lost 1,000x or 100,000x your money that you could have made, right? So you have to, in some ways, you have to always think about, as much as you want to think about what could go wrong and take those risks and systematically reduce those risks. And that's a job of a CEO, and every stage elevation of the rounds that companies raise, how is the valuation determined? I mean, these days, like this, but in reality, what it should be, what is the end value of this business? And then you say, these are all the systematic risks that are in there, and hence the value is much reduced. And as we systematically reduce those risks and get those risks out of the equation, the value should improve. right? And that's how it should be set up. But you want to also think about what could go right. And make sure you don't lose sight of that. In fact, that becomes very, very important when you're taking these large endeavors, right? It's things that could take 10, 15, 20 years. What could go right? Yes, everybody has known SpaceX is successful for the last 5, 7 years. But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. And they were already 10 years into that journey, right? I mean, Tesla was founded the year I started my company, right? And I've had like 3 careers since, and we're still in Tesla mode. So I think that's one thing. The thing that changed that's important to realize, 20 years ago, if you had asked me when I was a founder and I was pitching VCs and VCs were not getting it, most VCs were not getting what we were talking about, not just my own startup, but just general idea of this space. The reasoning was, as you said, VCs are typically geared and wired to either take technical risk or business risk. A lot of the stuff you do in enterprise software or consumer, there's little technical risk, but a lot of business risk. Nobody would argue even 15 years ago that you can put PHP pages together to create like Facebook. I mean, yes, there's a lot of technology underneath, but you could create a feed, Facebook feed, right? But will the dog eat the dog food? Will people use this sort of a service? You know, who would have thought that the most interesting, one of the most interesting imaging companies in the world would be photos that disappear? You know, we all grew up reading Kodak makes memories forever. And here's Snapchat that's like, take a photo of you picking your nose and it disappears in 24 months. And that took off. So there's a lot of that risk. And VCs were like tuned into that, and they would do their diligence on usage and, you know, engagement and all that. And there were other technical VCs who were like, you know, hey, you know, nobody will argue with you that there's a market for cancer medications. It's there. The question is, do you have a cure for cancer? If you have a cure for cancer, I got a lot of dollars for you. And that's how the technical risk was calculated. And people chose one or the other. And a lot of deep tech companies, as you said, often presented itself with both. You're like, you know, building a robot, even a simple robot, is a very hard task, right? Like there's a lot of shit that's happening in there. And yet you might also have, will people use it? I mean, I remember those Sony dog back in the day, right? I mean, for its time, it was magical. At least to those of us who were in the technology world, we thought it was magical. But will enough people buy it? You know, what tricks does it need to do for you to continue to stay engaged with it? And we didn't know that. Here's a, you know, rubric I use when I meet founders, because founders come to me and I'm in this privileged position where they come and share their wildest dreams, their biggest imaginations. And I think there are 2 big classes of founders. There are founders that are visionary, that are painting a world that does not exist. Think of like Steve Jobs when he says there should be a phone with no buttons on it. Right? What? Like, I was pretty comfortable with my BlackBerry, right? Very good at it. And then here comes the thing with the fat fingers and no copy and paste. And then we bought it, and we bought his dream, and look where it's brought us, right? Or even Elon Musk, right? There's going to be electric cars. And I was like, who's going to buy a $120,000 electric car? Like, seriously? Like, kit cars have been around for a while. But here we are, where now people are like, you know, I don't buy in a Tesla because when you stop at a stoplight, every car is a Tesla. I want something different, right? These are visionary founders who paint a picture, and their task is to convince the world. It takes them a long time. So they have to be very good at raising capital to sustain the organization, to bring their vision into reality. The second type of founders are more, you know, what I consider to be execution-led founders, right? So today, if a founder starts an autonomous car company, they're not painting anything new. They're not telling us what cannot be imagined. We all know that the future will include autonomous cars. In fact, future has already arrived in Silicon Valley, just not equally distributed, right? But still, Waymo can also only work in certain geographies, despite the billions of dollars went into it and the 15, 18 years of work that went into it. So it is about execution. It's about engineering. It's about making things work. And these founders, you know, Alex Karp comes to mind at Palantir. Most people still don't know what Palantir actually does, but he's been executing. You know, you worked at scale. Alex Wang comes to mind. It's like execution. And I think, you know, in fact, I may have heard this from you where you said these people serve their customers to build what is needed and eventually start to put some product wrapping around it. right?
Right.
And figure out a way to turn this into a company.
Right.
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 What might look to some people as a services
Right.
business, but it's not
Right.
always. But I think, I don't want to undermine their work. But the point is that they're in the execution mode.
Yeah.
Now, all visionary entrepreneurs have to execute, otherwise it doesn't work. And all execution guys eventually have to show some vision to keep the team together. But you can see where their strengths lie. And I think VCs that are able to understand that, the difference in personalities and behaviors, and making sure that the right kind of founder is in the right kind of a company or building the right kind of company, are able to do better in this industry. Like if you take somebody who's a visionary and put them in the grind of a manufacturing business, they'll be chewed up and thrown out.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Similarly, if you take somebody who's just grinding away at the bottom of the heap, trying to make the metal bend the right way, but if they can't sell the vision, and the vision is needed to be able to raise the capital that's required to put those machines in place,
Yep.
then they run into resources problem.
Yep. Yep.
Making that fit is first identifying that fit and then helping close the gaps, finding the right executive teams. These are things that I think VCs can do early on. And at the very early stages when I invest, this is a very important conversation. And this needs to happen in a very comfortable, open, honest environment. You're amazing, Mr. Founder, for what you're doing. I could never do what you're doing. But there are gaps. I believe in what you're doing. I'm on board with you, but let's make sure we fill in those gaps so we don't fall on ourselves. And I think this is where I believe investors, board members can play a very important role. And that is not a capital allocator role. That is a roll up your sleeves and becoming one with the founder role.
I know Applied Intuition is one of your investments. You're
Very proud of.
Very proud of, and Kaser is a unique leader. I think both vision and execution, but also we've talked about. I think has that willingness to just grind to make the business go. I don't actually know the story of your investment there, or kind of how you got to know Kaser, but
happy to recount in a brief way. Look, a lot of the relationships, as you know, you and I have known each other for years. Kaser and I have known each other over a decade. These relationships don't start with the transactional, come pitch me and I'll invest. Now, sometimes that happens and you fall in love in the first pitch. But in deep tech areas, that trust builds over time. And so Kaser and I knew each other for a long time, before he was even YC COO, but certainly when he was YC COO. And then he decided that he wants to start a company. He had a bunch of ideas. Automotive was not the only one. Very different ideas in different spaces. And we would take walks and talk about the different things that he was thinking through. And then he landed on this idea, which was, hey, here's a Detroit boy, Michigan boy that has landed in Silicon Valley. And I think he was in that way the visionary to say these two worlds are coming together. Not everybody sees it. There were founders in Silicon Valley who thought Michigan is dead, right? And automotive industry is dead, and who wants to work in it? Or even those working in the automotive software world were like looking down upon the car makers around the world. And him and Peter being from Michigan, the two co-founders, knew that this is not how it works. Like, you can bring Silicon Valley software to car making, which is entire economies of the world run on automotive. That could be an amazing thing. So anyways, when he ended up starting a company, we became, Series A investors and have invested in every round since. The company is now worth $15 billion, doing lots of revenues. It's been profitable for 7 years. It's probably the only large profitable physical AI company that I know of. And sky's the limit in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. But he is a good embodiment of, realizing that while he had this vision of Silicon Valley and Michigan working together, autonomous car or enabling autonomous cars was not something people didn't know. I mean, people had funded companies in Silicon Valley before that that were doing autonomous cars. So he had to be very execution oriented. And he had two key rules that he talks about in the company as cultural items. One is, just culture is very important, but and you have to really pay attention to that. I still go there, take off my shoes, wear slippers, and walk around the office because that's his culture in the office. But the two key rules he has was, one, customer over everything else, and two, speed over everything else. A lot of people think startups win because they have the best technology. The cycle time to bring technology into the real world is long enough that even if you had something amazing, by the time it becomes real and gets delivered to the customer in physical AI world, others may have started to catch up on it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You don't have, I can
Yes.
do this and nobody else can.
Yes. Yes.
So for him, it was, we need to have speed in execution.
Yes.
Proverbially, as Travis and others used to say, Uber and other founders, like, you got to break glass.
Yeah.
And you got to cut through it.
The way I think about this is, I mean, there's a time arbitrage, right? If you can bring the future ahead faster, you can arbitrage that time before everyone else brings that future ahead, right? This is something we're looking at heavily in the physical AI space right now, because we feel like we've got an insight that's a little bit ahead, and like if we can bring that future ahead faster, then there's a real arbitrage there as the rest of the industry catches up.
You have information and knowledge that nobody else does. Because you're working at the cutting edge of technology, you know what's now possible.
Yes.
Before others do.
Yes.
It's like the chat GPT guys
Yes.
knew what's possible,
Yes.
even though it was spitting out
Yes.
junk, but they could see it.
And that advantage, if you can move fast enough. Yeah.
That is going from, as Kessler likes to call it, going from a startup to building a business.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody can play startup. You can register a company for $20 and you have a company as a startup. And in Silicon Valley, you probably get funded but to turn that into a business is requiring that insight that you just had, which is, I know something others don't. Let me go figure out how I can make that reality, as fast as I can do it. Because if I am successful, others will follow me. Yeah. And I got to just run ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, for us, the insight came from, like, I had the opportunity to go deep on humanoid robots and understand exactly where we would use them at Amazon in 2018, right? So I've spent 8 years trying to think about where humanoid robots would be used, how they would be used, what kind of unit economics they need to hit, what kind of safety, how are you going to think about swapping batteries, like all these problems. And then just came to the conclusion, it wasn't actually the right form factor. It wasn't actually what we want. And so now it's fascinating because there's so much going into humanoids right now, and it's interesting. Like, I feel like I'm probably 8 years ahead, but it is an uncomfortable spot sometimes too, when the conventional wisdom is all centering on something that you looked at deeply. So I ask myself probably on a weekly basis, did I miss something here? I'm like, oh, like, being able to move a 1,500-pound cart is a really, really valuable capability, and there's no way we're going to be able to make the electro-actuated leg system do that.
I think if you put customer first, which you do, I know, the answer becomes more clear.
Yes,
right? Because you're not satisfying a VC's curiosity and itch. You're satisfying a customer's
This
need.
is the beauty. I was the customer, right? I analyzed this very purely as a buyer, right? Not as a technologist. What's going to be cool? Do I want more of a Star Wars future or more of a iRobot future? It was much more like, as the buyer at Amazon who was buying robots, buying companies, buying technology, what do I want, right? And I realized, oh, I don't want legs. I want strong motors, right? And so, but it is fascinating. I am always curious, I'm super appreciative of you. We've known each other for a long time, but when the opportunity to invest came up, you didn't hesitate, move very, very quickly. In this podcast, we've kind of somehow ended up with this question of what was it from your interaction with me over time that stands out? And we didn't prep on this question, so I'm always
you as always, you will
likely
always
to
hear the
blush
blunt
at whatever
thoughts.
you say, but I'm curious what you think stood out from just working with me.
Look, if you go back to MIT days, right? Everything that, it was like drinking from the fire hose, as we all said, things coming at us and you're like, holy shit, how do I process all of this? But being a prepared mind really matters and helps, right? Walking in there as a young student, when you go in and you've worked hard in previous years, you've done all the things that you could, you feel as prepared as you can be for the onslaught that's going to come at you, and you have no idea. In fact, most people going into MIT often don't know what major they're going to take, right? And so you don't know which field and which division and which department and what internships, and you may end up becoming a Nobel laureate while staying at MIT for the rest of your life. And I think the same way. So when I met you, the first thing that becomes very obvious is that you have this uniquely prepared mind. And in addition to being smart and all that stuff, like, I mean, when I meet somebody like you, I'm not judging your smartness. You've already passed that bar long ago. I think it's about being prepared to handle the challenges that are going to come at you. You're building the future. You're part of that movement that's going to change the world. The way it looks is going to not be the same 10 years from now. Are you prepared for what's coming at you? I don't know, and you don't know, right? It could be technological bottlenecks. It could be logistics and compliance and policies and politics. It could be capital resources. Like, in 2008, the world went into an economic crisis, and the best of the best startups and businesses folded. They had no fault of their own. So the founders that were prepared, like going back to, your Amazon, Jeff Bezos, saw his stock from here to down here when the dot-com crash happened, but he was prepared to survive that, right? And persist through that. So that was one of the very important things. The second thing was that I'm a sucker for, I would say, people who are practical and people who understand the value of building a business. Like I said, businesses have products have revenues, revenues have margins, customers are providing that. And I think you got that. I meet a lot of founders who don't know that. Now, some people are still able to build amazing companies despite that. But I think I am a sucker for people who understand that their customer is a customer, right? And servicing the customer is the goal. So that was very clear. The third thing is that, it wasn't like you had a one-trick pony. But I built this thing. Can I sell a lot of it? And I built it because I needed it. There's a lot of companies like that too. But it wasn't that, right? Like you were building a platform. So you had gone from in your own search at Amazon for solutions across Amazon. You were working on drones and you're working on humanoids and you had seen the vastness of capabilities that will be required over time to be able to automate things. Right? And replacing a human with another human-like skeleton wasn't the only thing. There's a lot of things that can be done in very different ways. And solving the problem is the thing. The thing should be the thing, right? My ability to maneuver rotors and motors in a body should not become the thing. It should be servicing something. I am bullish on humanoids, but I think it's like still 10 years out. Just too early, at least 10 years out. And I think what I saw and I think I see playing out is, the platform nature of that. Now, you have a lot more secrets that you haven't shared with the world, but I have a few that you've shared with me that I haven't shared with the world, and I won't. But the idea is that, if somebody looks at your platform and sees this as a robot that pulls carts, I think they're like, they're in La La Land, right? Like the 7-8 cameras, LiDARs, the multiple GPUs inside your, edge compute device that's rolling around the floor, being able to maneuver in complex 3D environments without having to interface with, warehouse management systems and, in real-time intelligence, right? And then dexterity and manipulation that comes as end effectors, your use cases grow and comes with that. And then the mobility of the system itself. All of this is a platform play, and you're building it out on top of each other. That is an important one. I often say, and this is not for you, but for founders in general, I learned this from Kessler in some ways, where, you can build companies that are either tool companies or platform companies or application layer companies. Founders generally tend to like application layer companies because it's closest to the customer. So the value prop to their customer is very clear. The problem is that a lot of the times to build a very large application layer company, unless you get very lucky, you have to build many, many applications and they may not all relate to each other. So hence the business becomes very complex very quickly. And can you really do that? VCs love platform. VCs like, this is great. We're the operating system for robots. We're the operating system for cars. We're the operating system for buildings. Like you hear these language like this used. The problem is that if you're the operating system for a car and you're a 7-person startup in Sunnyvale, which automotive company is about to risk their entire platform on 7 guys sitting in Sunnyvale? So then you need to have a long staying power, raise a lot of money, build up a big team, act bigger than you are to be able to convince the customer that they can depend on you, and all the above. Now, again, sometimes doable, not always. Tools are something that often get left behind. Tools are get the job done, right? And if you build a tool, the benefit is that the customer says, I can use this tool. I know exactly the ROI I need to get. And oh, by the way, it's not central to what I'm doing. And if I don't like it or if it doesn't work, I can just replace it with what I was using before or something else. It gives you the ability to build trust. And if you build trust with the customer and showcase even more than what the customer expected, they actually take you through a journey of moving from tools to operating systems to applications. And I think, great founders understand where their strengths lie and understand what this arc is going to look like for them and build towards that. And I think Cobot is on that journey, right? Like you have, there's a lot of amazing things that are happening in the hardware layer, in the software layer, intelligence layer, but you also have systems in the field that are operating at the customer sites.
It's fascinating you mentioned that because I've always been a platforms guy, right? The Netscape Net Center, Tell Me, Amazon. What attracted me to Scale was the kind of core platform of how do you deal with all this frontier data. But it's interesting that you note that like different companies have different kind of DNA. Because I hadn't put it to, and I don't know if I've told you this story, but I interviewed in Palo Alto, I don't know, 2004, 2005, with a little company above a ice cream shop with Jeff Rothschild, and then he brought in the young founder, Mark Zuckerberg. There were 10 or 12 people. But it was also clear I was like a platforms guy. I would like the social media thing. Like what was interesting was how could this be a communication platform? And it's become that with like WhatsApp and other capabilities. But it was interesting because Mark had a vision that's obviously been amazing that was hard for me to fully resonate with, because I was like, where is and that's ultimately what drew me to Amazon. Amazon was building platforms at a time where no one else really was, right? Like the 2007, 2008, 2009, there wasn't a lot of money going into platforms. There wasn't a lot of platforms being built. And then Amazon was building multiple e-commerce platform, the AWS platform. And so that was an incredible crucible. But then, platforms, to me, what makes a platform unique is the value in a platform comes from what you do consistently every time, the invariance that you bake into it. But to be effective, you have to allow variability. It has to work in different use cases. So, people are like, why build a robot that works in factories and warehouses and hospitals? And it's like, no, if we can build a robot that does all of that, then we have something that is a platform that is a building block for all kinds of mobility and movement. But you're right, there's a lot of infrastructure you have to put because the value is in what you do consistently for everyone. But that's what turns me on is make that real.
It's not only enough to know that you're a platforms person or not. It's also knowing, can you do what is required for this platform to become real? Meaning you have to then be able to gather the resources that are required to do that, right? A platform company doesn't start day one collecting revenue. Now, in your case, it's a little bit different because, again, you had established relationships. You had credibility in the field. You had credibility with the customers. You had credibility with the partners, with the vendors. A motor company that you call on is probably able to take you a little bit more seriously than a Joe Schmo calling, like I was and leaving MIT calling a motor company, right? And then the same thing with the investors, right? Like being able to put together the resources that are required to do that. I always tell founders that starting any company is really, really hard. Like starting an Indian restaurant is really hard. Like you will be working day and night, putting everything you've got into it. So if you're going to do something, you might as well do something that matters.
Yep.
And I think that's what I find valuable about founders in deep tech, because that's the risk that they're taking. They're saying, I'm going to go build this. I know there are easier ways to make money, but that's not what's driving them. The mission is to build something that they wish existed. And then they go and figure out what are the resources required to do it. right? And then they spread the message like gospel around the world. I always say five jobs of a CEO, right? You have to set the vision, like then you have to hire the best people to be able to execute on that vision. You have to raise the capital that's required to be able to hire those people, right? Then you have to, fourth thing, you have to send the message that, the vision, spread the gospel about it internally and externally again and again and again and again,
Yes.
hammer it down
Yes.
so that everybody knows it at any given time.
Yes.
This is what Cobot is, not only outside, but every single person in this company, this is what Cobot is.
Yes.
And the last bit is to hold people accountable.
Just a few little things. To kind of wrap this up, I'm curious. We're in a world of billion-dollar seed raises now, right? And yet you've gone building Red Glass, your own firm. Probably not yet writing billion-dollar seed checks, but
I don't ever
hopefully
want to write a billion-dollar seed check.
in a couple of years, maybe.
No, I don't want to do that.
Tell me a little bit, like, what's the you told me when you went and did it why, right? But now you've been at it for a bit. Is the motivation the same? Has it worked out the way you hoped, or is there something else about it that's lighting you up these days?
It's exactly the same. Like, so I've been fortunate to be at firms that are some of the largest firms in Silicon Valley right now. General Catalyst is arguably one of the best firms in Silicon Valley, probably one of the largest firms in the world, VC firms in the world. And Lux Capital also has become a very large firm, and I was a big part of that, right? But I was always the founder's investor. Like, I want deep, authentic relationships. I'm not a capital allocator. That's not how I think about when I go about my day. Like, I don't go read news about macroeconomics and, should we be depositing more money into real estate or Africa or China or whatever. I look at founders building products, and should those products exist, and this founder turn this product idea into a company and a company into a business. That's how I think about it, and it's best done the way I'm doing it now. You said something to me when we were having lunch some time back, where founders at the early stages, even some of the most successful people before they become founders, at the early stages, they have a little bit of this imposter syndrome. They have this idea that I've been very successful before, number one. Can I replicate that success? Like, you were very successful at Amazon. There was pressure on you. This better not be a failure, right? Yeah. You don't want to be like very successful and boom, right? So there's pressure on you. It's also that, the corner office is a pretty lonely place.
Yes.
Right? Everybody in this company wants to hear good things are happening. Now, they want to hear the truth, of course, and you share the truth.
Yes.
But you have to encourage them and motivate them and excite them so that they put an extra 110% of what they've got into the company. But not everything is always rosy, right? There are down moments personally, professionally, all kinds of things happen. This is where your first investor, your first board member is a real partner. An early stage investor would probably buy 10 to 20% of your company. That's about as much or probably more than what you would give to a co-founder. Okay? And when you're choosing that co-founder, you're not going to find, when you choose a co-founder, you don't go find the co-founder that takes the least amount of equity. Oh, this guy asked for only 2%, so I brought him on. That guy was really good, but he was asking for 15%. No, you don't do that. The future of the company rests on it. And I think these early investors should be the same way. That's what I wanted to build. That's not to say other firms cannot provide that. But what happens as the firms become larger is that the economic incentives completely change. Right? If you raise $2 billion every 3 years and you have like basically 5-6 guys making the decision, there's no humanly way possible for them to spend time on a company where they've invested $3-5 million. It just doesn't work. Right? So when you go to a big firm compared to when you come to Red Glass Ventures, at Red Glass Ventures, you sit with me, you hang out with me, you hear my views on everything. This hiring, that term in your term sheet, and this. When you go to a big firm, you're talking to somebody 3 years out of school. Because the big guy is like, take you out for dinner, but then he can't be involved in this. And you're like, wait a second, I wouldn't hire you as a PM at my company, but you're going to be my boss? Like, how does this work? So I think I wanted to build a firm that's founder first, that's company friendly, but that's really building authentic, deep relationships with the founders, because founders is the asset that Silicon Valley has. Like, that's the most important thing. I'm not the only one who recognizes this, but you're actually seeing a bunch of senior investors who love early stage investing, who have product type DNA in their bodies.
Yep.
They're leaving big firms to start their new firms because there's a movement happening to do that. 15, 17 years ago, when I started venture, Andreessen Horowitz was a year old. Vinod Khosla was like 2 years old. Thrive Capital, Founders Fund, Ribbit Capital, Paradigm. These firms did not even exist. There's a movement that happened at that time that led to the creation of these firms that are now some of the most well-known firms. And that movement was founder-friendly investors. Founders Fund said we would never fire a founder. Andreessen Horowitz, all our GPs are former founders, right? So that's the movement that was happening. That led to the creation of new VC firms, and the old VC firms mostly subsided into the background, right? I think there's a new movement happening now. And that movement is, early stage focused venture, right? Bigger firms, they've become the economic infrastructure of startup. You go to them for every stage of financing. When you talk to a big firm, even if they led your Series A, because they can also lead your Series F, you're always in pitch mode to them. Right? The early stage founder that put $3 million into you and can't really put any more money into where you are, you're no longer in pitch mode with them. You're in the problem solving mode with them. And I think that's a very special relationship that I cherish. I enjoy that because there's still that founder in me. There's still that product DNA in me, or product management or project development DNA in me. And I want to bring that to the fore. And I want to hire people who have that kind of a passion and love for early stage venture. We take risks, but the biggest thing that we accomplish is build relationships that last forever. You're an advisor to me, right? Like, I think of you not just as a founder. Like, I call you, hey man, there's this guy I saw, this idea. Does this make any sense? And you give me honest advice. You're not like bullshitting.
No, I think people ask me sometimes how I brought the investor group and I'm fortunate to have a great network for a long time, and so my investors are, in large part people I've known for a long time. Sven Stroban at Khosla, I didn't know as long, but what I picked for was, the flip side of like having a successful career and being at successful companies is that it's easy to think you're right. So I have less of the imposter syndrome. I have more the risk of like, hey, I might have a blind spot that I just don't notice, right? And so I intentionally picked investors who would push me, right? Sven at Khosla, Alfred at Sequoia, Hemant, Paul at GC, yourself, like people that I respected, which when they said, Brad, I think you've got a blind spot, I wouldn't be like, oh, that person doesn't know what they're talking about, right? I'd be like, no, it would cut, and it does. Like, we'll have a conversation, you'll point out something about our business or maybe how, how I'm positioning it, and I'll spin for like the next 3 weeks trying to reconcile for myself. Like, okay, I have this, Bilal's pointing at this, like, how do I, and then we'll follow up and talk more about it. But that's what I appreciate.
That's you paid for. It's real equity that you paid me to do this. Yes, I gave you money for it, but that money is now worth multiples of that, right? This is real equity that you paid. You should get your money's worth. And I think every founder deserves that, even if they're on day zero of their company. Every day is day zero or day one. But it's every day they should be getting this real, honest feedback, but also the, understanding their business, not shooting from the hip.
It's that combination of like empathy, like the willingness to actually understand the business and understand what the founder's going through, with the willingness to push as well. Because I think the incentives work the other way too, which is like, hey, sometimes, you're going to give more allocation to that board member that doesn't push you very much, right? That you like them more because they don't. And it's like, no, I advise all founders, like, find that person who is going to understand your business. The last thing you want to be is pushed by someone who doesn't take the time to really understand the business or what you're trying to do. But if you can find those investors that will go deep with you, as you said, it's a relationship, but also can push you. And so
there's a cheat sheet for this, Brad. The cheat sheet is that you should look for founders that when things are going great, they're harsh on you. They're actually hard on you. They're pushing you. And when things are not going well, they're the source of calm, and they're the source of strength. And you will notice that as the world has moved towards more consensus investing, when things are going well, when you announce your next 100, 200 million raise, everybody and their mother who's put any dollars into you will be wanting to write blog posts about you, will be your biggest cheerleaders, we're so proud to back you and all that stuff, right? You see that every day now, practically. This company raised 500 million, this company raised $1 billion, and everybody's like posting about it. It is when things don't go well. Where are they? Like, is your name scrubbed from their website? Right?
Right.
And I think you have to find people. I mean, look, this is not a judgment on anybody, but this is just who I aspire to be. Because I aspire to be the person that when you come and talk to me and you're pitching me, things are obviously going well, because if you're talking to me, you're probably talking to other great investors as well. So things are going well. And you're hearing real questions and real pushbacks. You feel like if this guy was along with me for this ride, I will do better and I will go further and faster. And then when there's some struggle somewhere, that's when I'll be the first person you'll pick up the phone and call, because you know that he's not going to freak out and be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But more like, all right, let's get problem solving.
Yep.
Because we're still in business. We're just doing business.
Yep. Awesome. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much, Bilal.
Thank you for letting me be part of this journey, and good luck on this amazing thing you're building.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.